My adoptive father never wanted me, made my life hell for 15 years, and now he wants me to pay his $40,000 medical bills. Should I help the man who destroyed my childhood? I never thought I'd be writing this here, but this situation is eating me alive and I can't talk to anyone in my family about it without causing a massive explosion. So here's the background. I'm 30 years old, married to my wife Megan for 6 years, and we have 2 kids, Zara, 4, and Jake, 2. I work in software engineering and make decent money, definitely more than I ever imagined growing up. My adoptive mom Linda lives with us now since she retired last year, and she's amazing with the kids. She's honestly the reason I turned out okay despite everything. The thing is, I was adopted when I was 3 years old by Linda and her husband Ronald. Linda couldn't have biological children, and Ronald never wanted to adopt in the first place. Linda told me years later that she basically wore him down until he agreed, thinking he'd come around once I was actually in their house. He never came around. From as early as I can remember, Ronald made it clear that I wasn't really his son. Not in those exact words when I was little, but in every action. When other dads would come to school pickup, Ronald would send Linda or make excuses. When I played Little League, Linda would be there cheering while Ronald sat in his car reading the newspaper, occasionally glancing up with this look like he was counting down the minutes until he could leave. The worst part wasn't even the neglect though. It was the active hostility that started when I hit middle school. I think that's when it really sank in for Ronald that I wasn't going anywhere, that this wasn't some temporary thing he had to endure. I remember being 12 and getting excited about making the honor roll, running home to show them my report card. Linda was so proud, hugging me and putting it on the fridge. Ronald looked at it and said, "Don't let it go to your head. Smart kids are a dime a dozen." That became his thing, cutting me down whenever I had any kind of success or happiness. Made the basketball team? It's just JV, don't act like you're going pro. Got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship? Hope you can handle the real world when you're not getting special treatment anymore. The abuse wasn't constant, but it was consistent. He never hit me, but the psychological stuff was brutal. He'd ignore me for days if I did something that annoyed him. He'd make jokes about adopted kids in front of his friends that were clearly directed at me. Once when I was 14, I accidentally broke his fishing rod while helping him load the car, and he screamed at me for 20 minutes about how I never respected other people's property because you didn't grow up learning the value of things. Linda tried to shield me from the worst of it, but she was caught in the middle. She'd make excuses for him. Your father's just stressed about work, or he shows love differently than other people. I think she genuinely believed that if she kept trying, he'd eventually warm up to me. She overcompensated by being extra supportive, paying for all my school stuff, driving me everywhere, basically being both parents. High school was probably the worst period. I was getting good grades, had friends, was pretty normal despite everything at home. But Ronald seemed to get more bitter as I got older and more independent. He'd make comments about how much money I was costing them. He'd forget about school events or activities I was in. When I got my first job at 16, he immediately started charging me rent, not because they needed the money, but because it's time you learned responsibility. The breaking point came during my senior year. I'd been dating this girl, Melissa, for about 8 months. Really sweet girl, and her parents actually liked me, invited me to family dinners, treated me like I belonged somewhere. Ronald hated her, though I never understood why. Maybe because her family accepted me in a way he never had. Anyway, Melissa and I were planning to go to prom together. Linda had offered to help pay for my tux rental and everything. The day before prom, I came home from school and Ronald was waiting for me in the kitchen with this envelope. Inside was a bill for every single thing they'd spent on me over the past year: food, utilities, my car insurance, everything down to the electricity for my bedroom lights. It came to over $8,000. He told me I had 2 choices: pay up or don't go to prom. He said he was tired of throwing money away on someone who wasn't even grateful. Linda was at work, had no idea this was happening. I called Melissa crying and had to cancel on her the night before prom. To this day, I don't think she ever really understood what happened. That night when Linda got home, there was a huge fight. I'd never heard them yell at each other like that. She told him he was being cruel and unreasonable. He said she was enabling me and that I needed to learn that actions have consequences. I locked myself in my room and just listened to them destroy each other over me. College was my escape. I went to school 6 hours away and barely came home except for holidays. When I did visit, Ronald would make little digs about my major, computer science, my grades, my social life. Nothing was ever good enough. Linda would call me every week, but Ronald never asked to talk to me, never asked how school was going. When I graduated, Linda came to the ceremony. Ronald didn't. She said he had to work, but I later found out he spent that weekend at a fishing tournament. That was kind of the moment I realized he would never ever accept me as his son, no matter what I accomplished. I met Megan during my last semester of college. She was getting her nursing degree, and we just clicked immediately. She knew my family situation was complicated, but I didn't really go into detail until we'd been together for over a year. When I finally told her everything, she was horrified. Her family is really close, and she couldn't understand how a parent could treat their child that way. We got engaged after dating for 2 years, and that's when things got even weirder with Ronald. Linda was over the moon, immediately started planning and asking about venues and dates. Ronald's reaction was to ask if we were sure we weren't rushing into things. Then he made some comment about how some people just aren't cut out for marriage, while looking directly at me. The wedding planning was a nightmare. Linda wanted to help pay for stuff, which was really generous since they weren't wealthy by any means. But Ronald kept making these passive-aggressive comments about the cost, about how elaborate everything was, about how young people today expect everything to be handed to them. 2 weeks before the wedding, he told Linda he wasn't sure he could get the time off work to attend. Linda lost it. Completely lost it. She told him if he didn't show up to walk me down the aisle, their marriage was over. I'd never seen her that angry before, and honestly, I was shocked she'd go that far for me. He showed up to the wedding, but he was miserable the entire time. Didn't smile in any of the photos, barely spoke to anyone, left right after dinner without saying goodbye. Megan's dad ended up being more of a father figure to me that day than Ronald ever was. When Zara was born 4 years ago, Linda was there within hours, crying happy tears and helping Megan with everything. She stayed for 2 weeks, cooking and cleaning and just being amazing. Ronald visited once, for about 30 minutes, barely looked at Zara, and made some comment about how expensive kids were these days. Same thing when Jake was born 2 years ago. Linda was our lifeline. Ronald was a ghost. About a year ago, Linda retired and asked if she could move in with us. Megan and I were thrilled. Linda is incredible with the kids, helps around the house, and honestly, she's more like a real parent to me than Ronald ever was. She pays us a small amount for room and board, but mostly she just helps with childcare and cooking, and the kids absolutely adore her. Ronald, meanwhile, is living alone in their old house on his retirement income. And apparently, that's where the problems started. 3 months ago, Ronald had a heart attack. It wasn't massive, but it was serious enough that he needed surgery and a bunch of follow-up care. Linda immediately wanted to go stay with him and help him recover, but he told her not to bother, that he could handle it himself. That should have been a red flag, but Linda being Linda, she respected his wishes while worrying herself sick about him. Last month, Linda got a call from Ronald's doctor's office. Apparently, Ronald had listed her as his emergency contact and insurance beneficiary, and there were some unpaid medical bills they needed to discuss. Turns out, Ronald's insurance didn't cover as much of the surgery and treatment as he'd expected, and he owed close to $40,000 in medical debt. Linda was panicked. She has some savings, but not nearly enough to cover that kind of money. She asked me if I knew what Ronald's financial situation was, and I honestly had no idea. He'd never talked to me about money except to complain about how much I was costing him. That's when Linda sat me down and told me that Ronald had been asking her to approach me about helping with the medical bills. Not asking me directly, mind you. He apparently doesn't want to give me the satisfaction of him needing my help. But he's been hinting to Linda that maybe I should step up, since I'm doing so well financially and Linda is living with us now. I was speechless. This man who spent my entire childhood and teenage years making me feel unwanted, who couldn't be bothered to show up for the most important moments of my life, who treats his own grandson and granddaughter like strangers, now wants me to bail him out of his medical debt? And he won't even ask me himself? Linda could see how upset I was getting, and she immediately backtracked, saying she wasn't asking me to do anything, just letting me know what was going on. But I could tell she was torn. She's worried about Ronald, but she also knows how he's treated me all these years. The thing is, I could help him. Megan and I are doing really well financially. I make good money, we've got solid savings, our mortgage is manageable, and we're not living paycheck to paycheck by any means. $40,000 would be a hit, but it wouldn't destroy us or anything. But I can't. Every time I think about writing that check, I remember being 17 years old and crying because I couldn't take my girlfriend to prom. I remember graduating college and looking out into the audience, seeing Linda cheering and Ronald's empty seat. I remember him barely acknowledging his grandchildren exist. Megan's been amazing through all this. She told me whatever I decide, she'll support me. But she also pointed out that this isn't really about Ronald, it's about Linda. Linda loves him despite his flaws, and watching him struggle with this debt is killing her. Megan suggested maybe we could help Linda help Ronald, so it doesn't feel like I'm directly bailing out someone who's been awful to me. But even that feels wrong somehow. Like I'd be enabling Ronald to continue being a terrible person without consequences. Linda hasn't brought it up again since that first conversation, but I can tell she's stressed about it. She's been quieter lately, and I caught her on the phone with Ronald yesterday, and it sounded tense. I keep going back and forth on this. Part of me thinks I should be the bigger person, help pay the bills, and maybe this crisis will finally make Ronald realize that I'm his son whether he likes it or not. But another part of me thinks that paying his bills would just validate all his years of treating me like garbage, like I owe him something for the privilege of being adopted. I honestly don't know what the right thing to do is here. Am I being petty and vindictive by refusing to help? Or am I finally standing up for myself after years of emotional abuse? It's been 6 weeks since my first post, and I wanted to update everyone on what's happened since then. First off, thank you to everyone who responded. Reading your comments really helped me process this situation and figure out what I wanted to do. A lot of people asked for more details about Ronald's behavior over the years, and honestly, I think I downplayed how bad some of it was in my first post. I was trying to be fair to him, but my therapist, yes, I started seeing someone after posting here, helped me realize that I've been minimizing the abuse for years. Like, there was this incident when I was 10 where I got really sick with the flu. Linda was out of town visiting her sister, and Ronald was supposed to take care of me. Instead of taking me to the doctor when my fever spiked, he told me to quit being dramatic and went to play poker with his buddies. I ended up having to call Linda myself from their bedroom phone, crying because I felt so awful. She cut her trip short and came home immediately, and I ended up needing antibiotics for what had turned into pneumonia. When Linda confronted Ronald about it, he said I was manipulating her and that kids these days were too soft. I was 10 years old with a 103-degree fever. Or the time when I was 15 and saved up money for my part-time job to buy Linda a birthday present, this necklace she'd been admiring at the mall. Ronald saw me give it to her and later pulled me aside to tell me I was showing off and trying to make him look bad because his gift, a gift card to a restaurant, wasn't as thoughtful. He made me return the necklace and give Linda the cash instead, telling her I decided the necklace was too expensive. There were dozens of incidents like this over the years. Ronald consistently found ways to undermine any connection I tried to build with Linda, any confidence I tried to develop, any happiness I managed to find. My therapist called it systematic emotional abuse designed to maintain control and dominance. Hearing it described that way by a professional really helped me understand that this wasn't just difficult family dynamics. This was genuine abuse. Anyway, about 3 weeks after my first post, things came to a head. Ronald had apparently gotten more desperate about the medical bills and started pressuring Linda harder. She called me one evening crying and said Ronald had told her that if I wasn't going to step up and help family, then maybe she should reconsider living with us and move back in with him to help figure out their finances. I was furious. Not at Linda, at Ronald for putting her in that position. He was basically trying to use her as a pawn to manipulate me into paying his bills. The fact that he was willing to disrupt Linda's life and her relationship with her grandchildren just to avoid having to swallow his pride and ask me for help directly, that's when I realized nothing had changed. He was still the same selfish, manipulative person he'd always been. I told Linda that her living situation with us wasn't conditional on anything, and that she shouldn't feel pressured to move out because of Ronald's financial problems. But I also told her that I'd made my decision about the medical bills, and I wasn't going to pay them. She asked me why, and for the first time in my life, I was completely honest with her about how Ronald had treated me and how it affected me. I told her about the prom incident, about all the times he belittled me, about how he'd never once acted like a real father to me. I explained that helping him financially would feel like validating years of abuse and that I couldn't do it. Linda was quiet for a long time after I finished talking. Then she said she'd always known Ronald struggled with the adoption, but she didn't realize how cruel he'd been to me specifically. She apologized for not protecting me better when I was younger, and for putting me in this position now. I told her she didn't need to apologize. She'd been the best mother I could have asked for, and none of Ronald's behavior was her fault. But I also told her that I needed her to stop being the go-between for Ronald's financial problems. If he wanted help from me, he needed to ask me directly and acknowledge how he'd treated me over the years. 2 days later, Ronald called me. Not Linda, me directly. I almost didn't answer because I was so shocked to see his name on my caller ID. The conversation was something else. He started off by saying he'd heard I was being difficult about helping with his medical bills. I told him that wasn't how I described the situation, and that if he wanted to have a conversation about this, he needed to start by acknowledging how he'd treated me over the years. He got defensive immediately. Started saying that he'd done his best raising me, that adoption was hard for everyone involved, and that I was being ungrateful for everything he and Linda had provided for me. When I brought up specific incidents, like the prom thing or missing my college graduation, he either claimed he didn't remember them or said I was exaggerating what happened. Then he said something that just crystallized everything for me. He said, "Look, Lucas, I know we've had our differences, but I'm your father and you owe me some loyalty here." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, which seemed to shock him into silence. I said, "Ronald, you have never been my father. You've been a man who lived in the same house as me for 15 years and resented every minute of it. A father shows up to his son's graduation. A father doesn't charge his teenager rent as punishment. A father doesn't make his son cancel prom over a made-up debt. You want loyalty? You should have tried earning it sometime in the last 27 years. He started yelling then, saying I was disrespectful and selfish, that he'd sacrificed for me, that I'd had every opportunity in life because of him and Linda. I let him rant for a few minutes, then I said, "You know what, Ronald? You're right about one thing. I did have every opportunity in life. But that was because of Linda, not you. She's the one who sacrificed for me. She's the one who showed up. She's the one who earned my loyalty. You've earned exactly what you're getting from me right now. Nothing." And I hung up. Linda called me an hour later. Apparently, Ronald had come home raging about our conversation, saying I was impossible, and proving everything he'd always thought about adopted kids. Linda told him that if he said one more negative word about me or tried to manipulate her into getting involved again, she was done with their marriage. I was shocked. Linda has always been conflict avoidant, always tried to keep the peace between Ronald and me. But I think hearing him disparage me and try to use her as a weapon was finally too much for her. Ronald apparently backed down after that, but the damage was done. Linda said their relationship has been tense ever since, and she's been questioning a lot of things about their marriage that she'd previously overlooked or excused. 3 days ago, Linda told me that Ronald had gotten a loan against their house to pay the medical bills. It's not ideal, the interest rate is pretty high, and it'll add years to his mortgage payments, but it's manageable on his retirement income. So the immediate crisis is resolved, at least financially. But Linda also told me something else. She said that during one of their arguments about the medical bills, Ronald admitted that he'd never wanted to adopt me, that he'd only agreed to it because Linda threatened to leave him if he didn't. And he said that he'd spent all these years waiting for me to prove him right by being ungrateful or troubled or unsuccessful. Hearing that was, I don't even know how to describe it. Devastating, but also weirdly liberating. It confirmed what I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe, that Ronald's treatment of me was never about anything I did wrong. It was about his own issues with the adoption, his own inability to love a child who wasn't biologically his. Linda said she told Ronald that his attitude had been unfair to me and destructive to their family, and that she was ashamed of how long she'd enabled it by making excuses for him. She said she'd never realized how much his behavior had affected me because I'd always seemed so resilient and successful despite it. Yesterday, Linda asked me if I would consider going to family therapy with her and Ronald. She said she wanted to try to repair our family relationships before it was too late. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I'm not sure there's anything to repair where Ronald is concerned. Some relationships are just too damaged to fix. What I do know is that I feel lighter than I have in years. Setting that boundary, refusing to be manipulated into paying Ronald's bills, standing up for myself in that phone call, it felt like finally putting down a weight I'd been carrying since I was a kid. Megan said she's proud of me for not letting Ronald guilt me into paying his bills. She said watching me stand up to him was like watching me finally become the person I was meant to be before years of emotional abuse taught me to make myself smaller. The kids have noticed that Linda seems sadder lately, and they've been extra sweet to her, which is heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. Zara drew her a picture of our family. Me, Megan, Zara, Jake, and Linda, all holding hands in front of our house. Ronald isn't in the picture, and when Megan asked Zara about it, Zara said, "Grandma Linda is sad about the mean man, but he's not part of our family." Out of the mouths of babes, right? I'm still processing all of this, and I'm sure I'll be working through it in therapy for a while. But I know I made the right decision. Ronald's medical bills aren't my responsibility, especially when he's never acted like I was his responsibility either. For people who might be in similar situations, whether it's with adoptive parents, biological parents, or any family member who's been abusive, I guess my advice would be this. You don't owe anyone anything just because you share DNA or a last name or a house. Family is about love and support and showing up for each other. If someone hasn't been family to you, you don't have to be family to them, no matter what they're going through. Linda will always be my mom, and my kid's grandma. Ronald is just a man who used to live in the same house as us. And I'm finally okay with that. Thanks again to everyone who took the time to read my story and offer advice. This community really helped me work through one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make.